stand alone near the balcony of the Regency Grand Ballroom, watching 250 of Chicago's elite mingle beneath rose-gold chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes. My champagne flute remains full, untouched for the past hour while I observe the performance unfold before me. This is my father's moment, his 65th birthday celebration, and everyone who matters in this city has arrived to pay homage to Richard Langford. The marble floors gleam so brilliantly they reflect the women's jewels like mirrors, creating small galaxies of light with each movement. I adjust the sleeve of my simple black dress, feeling the familiar twist in my stomach that always accompanies these events. And now, the MC announces, his voice bouncing off the 30-foot ceilings, a few words from the man of the hour. My father strides to the microphone with the confidence of someone who has owned every room he's walked into since 1980. His silver hair catches the light, his posture straight as a ruler despite his age. The room falls silent. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," he begins, his voice carrying that signature authoritative tone that made him famous in boardrooms across the Midwest. Looking around this room, I see the faces of friends, colleagues, and family who have been part of my journey. The crowd nods appreciatively. I take a small sip of champagne, finally, because I know what's coming next. But tonight isn't just about celebrating the past. It's about looking toward the future of Langford legacy. His eyes find his golden boy in the crowd. And that future is in excellent hands with my son, Garrett. Garrett stands, flashing that campaign-ready smile he perfected at Northwestern. At 30, he's already a vice president at my father's company, with a corner office larger than most apartments. Garrett has exceeded every expectation I've ever had, my father continues, his chest puffing with pride. Harvard Business School, top of his class. Already closed deals with 3 international clients this quarter alone. He understands what it means to carry on a legacy. The crowd applauds. Garrett gives a modest nod, his hand resting on his wife Clara's shoulder. She beams up at him, her diamond necklace catching the light. My father's expression shifts then, almost imperceptibly, but I catch it because I've been studying his micro-expressions since childhood. His smile tightens at the corners. His shoulders square slightly. And then there's my daughter, Felicia. The room quiets. A few heads turn toward me, but most don't know where to look. I remain perfectly still. Who, at 27, still hasn't quite found her direction. A few uncomfortable chuckles ripple through the crowd. Someone coughs. Still living in that tiny loft in Lincoln Park, he continues, his voice taking on a false concern that makes my spine stiffen. Still driving that old Toyota. I offered her a position at the company 5 years ago, but she insisted on finding her own path. He makes air quotes with his fingers. The whispers start immediately. I can almost hear them. Poor Richard, having to deal with such a disappointment, and after paying for her education at Wharton too. This is nothing new. When I was 8, I brought home an A in mathematics, and my father asked why it wasn't an A+. When I was 16 and won second place in the state debate championship, he wondered aloud why I couldn't have been first. When Garrett brought home his first girlfriend at 18, my father took them both to dinner at Gibson's. When I brought home my first boyfriend at the same age, my father asked him about his plans for the future, until the poor boy excused himself to use the bathroom and never returned. I've spent 27 years trying to earn a nod of approval that never came. 27 years trying to prove myself worthy of the Langford name, while watching my half-brother receive praise for breathing. Something shifts inside me as I set down my champagne glass. Not the familiar ache of disappointment, but something steadier, more resolved. I make my way toward my father's table, threading between round tables draped in cream-colored linens. The room falls quiet as I approach. Conversations pause mid-sentence. Even the waitstaff freezes. My father looks up from his seat, irritation flashing across his face. "Felicia," he says, his tone carrying a warning. "This isn't the time for one of your scenes. Don't embarrass yourself. Again." Vivian, my stepmother, doesn't even attempt to hide her contempt. At 48, she's still beautiful in that practiced, meticulous way that requires 2 hours of preparation each morning. She slides her manicured hand over my father's arm. "Richard, perhaps security should." "I just wanted to congratulate you on your birthday, Dad," I say, my voice steadier than I expected. Garrett smirks from across the table, his arm draped around Clara's shoulders. They're the perfect couple from central casting, both tall, blonde, impeccably dressed. Clara's expression is blank, as though she's looking through me rather than at me. "Well, my father says, checking his watch. You've done that. Now if you'll excuse us, Senator Benson was just telling us about the waterfront development bill. I don't move. For once in my life, I don't retreat at the first sign of his dismissal. My father's face hardens. He sets down his fork with deliberate precision. Felicia, I think you've had enough to drink tonight. I haven't had a drop, I reply. His jaw tightens. Security, he calls, raising a hand without taking his eyes off me. Please escort my daughter out. She's had too much to drink. A security guard approaches hesitantly, his face apologetic. He's young, maybe 25, clearly uncomfortable with the task he's been assigned. Miss Langford, he begins uncertainly. If you could please come with me. I hold my ground, the marble floor solid beneath my feet. 27 years of trying to please this man, of shrinking myself to avoid his disapproval. 27 years of watching Garrett receive everything I worked twice as hard for. The security guard shifts his weight from one foot to the other, waiting for me to make this easier for everyone by simply walking away, as I always have before. But not tonight. The security guard shifts uncomfortably beside me, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallows. Miss Langford, please, he whispers, glancing sideways at my father. I remain rooted to the marble floor, a strange calm washing over me. For 27 years, I've always backed down, always walked away. Not tonight. Jenkins, my father barks at the young guard. I said, escort her out. The guard Jenkins blinks rapidly, his hand hovering near my elbow without quite touching it. A second security officer approaches, older with salt and pepper hair and a manager's pin on his lapel. He leans toward my father and murmurs something. Richard Langford's face remains impassive. Speak up, man. Speak up, man. The security manager straightens his shoulders. Sir, Miss Langford is the primary owner of the Hawthorne Plaza. The words drop into the ballroom like a stone into still water. Ripples of silence spread outward, table by table. Conversations halt mid-sentence. A woman in crimson silk freezes with her champagne glass suspended halfway to her lips. Someone's fork clatters against fine china. My father's confidence dissolves in stages, first confusion, then disbelief, finally dawning horror. Beside him, Vivian's contemptuous smile freezes on her face, calcifying into something brittle and fragile. What did you say? Richard demands, his voice pitched higher than normal. Records confirm Miss Felicia Langford purchased Hawthorne Plaza 18 months ago through her company. The security manager confirms, his tone professional but with the faintest hint of satisfaction. Whispers break out across the ballroom. I catch fragments as they bounce off the 30-foot ceilings. I heard of Arden Capital but never connected. Buying up half of downtown. Playing the long game right under his nose. My hands steady as I pull my phone from my clutch. No trembling, no hesitation. Something has shifted inside me, some fundamental recalibration of my center of gravity. I could lash out now. Could humiliate him as he's humiliated me countless times. Instead, I unlock my screen and pull up the property details, turning it toward the security manager. Thank you, Mr. Reeves, I say, reading his name badge. As you can see, Arden Capital Holdings completed the purchase for $213 million in March of last year. The Chicago Tribune business editor, seated at a nearby table, sits up straighter. The planning commissioner, 3 tables over, sets down his drink and watches with newfound interest. Richard pushes back his chair and stands. This is absurd. I would have known if... The transaction was conducted through a series of LLCs. I explain, my voice carrying in the hushed room. Standard practice in commercial real estate acquisition. You're saying you own this building? Garrett asks, leaning forward, his perfectly knotted tie suddenly askew. The entire Hawthorne Plaza? Clara's hand flutters to her throat, to the diamond necklace that suddenly seems to choke her. Yes, I answered simply. Senator Benson clears his throat. Richard, you never mentioned your daughter was in real estate development. Because she isn't, my father insists, but uncertainty creeps into his tone. This is some kind of misunderstanding. 2 developers from Westfield Properties exchange glances, then look at me with new respect. One nods slightly, a gesture that speaks volumes in this world where billions change hands with minimal fanfare. Mr. Reeves, the security manager, stands awkwardly between worlds, My father's command on one side, the truth of ownership on the other. I feel a twinge of sympathy for him. It's fine, I tell him quietly. But please ask the building manager to review tenant policy with my family later. Relief washes over his face as he nods and steps back. For a fleeting second, when no one is looking, I allow my mask to slip. The cost of this moment floods through me, years of working 16-hour days, sacrificing friendships, relationships, even my health at times. Building in secret while enduring my father's public dismissals. The loneliness of it all presses against my ribcage like a physical weight. Then I breathe out, and the mask slips back into place. My father recovers first, his business instincts kicking in. "Well," he says with a strained laugh, "it seems my daughter has been keeping secrets." He attempts to regain control, to frame this as a charming family surprise, rather than a complete upheaval of the power dynamic he's cultivated for decades. But the damage is done. The whispers continue, growing louder. The narrative is shifting before our eyes. Richard Langford, the titan of Chicago real estate, standing in a building owned by the daughter he just publicly ridiculed. Garrett leans toward Richard, whispering urgently. Vivian's fingers clench her napkin, knuckles white against crimson nails. Clara's eyes dart between us, recalculating allegiances with every passing second. "If you'll excuse me," I say. "I should greet the mayor. He's just arrived." As I turn, I catch sight of the city's most prominent developers straightening in their chairs, their attention locked on me instead of my father for the first time ever. The planning commissioner nods respectfully. A Pulitzer-winning economics journalist pulls out her notebook. Tonight, everything changes. I've spent years building my company, while my father built his legacy on outdated principles and exploitation. I've purchased 9 properties across Chicago without a single person connecting them to the directionless daughter of Richard Langford. Until tonight. I move through the crowd, accepting handshakes and business cards, aware of my father watching from his table, his world tilting on its axis. This wasn't how I planned to reveal myself, but perhaps it's better this way. Clean, decisive. My phone buzzes with a text from my assistant. CNN Business requesting comment on Hawthorne acquisition. Forbes is also calling. I slip the phone back into my clutch. That can wait. For now, I watch as Richard rises from his chair and makes his way toward me, his expression unreadable. "A word," he says, gesturing toward the balcony. "In private." I nod and follow him, feeling 250 pairs of eyes tracking our movement. This is just the beginning. 15 minutes later, as I walk through the crowd, I see Garrett whispers urgently into our father's ear, his polished cufflinks flashing under the chandeliers as he gestures with barely contained panic. Richard's complexion pales to the color of the cream tablecloths. Across the table, Vivian manufactures a brittle laugh for the Hendersons, Chicago's oldest banking family, while her fingers drum an anxious rhythm against her champagne flute. "Miss Langford?" I turn to find Martin Weber, founder of Weber Development Group, standing beside me. His silver eyebrows arch high above shrewd blue eyes. 10 years ago, he rejected my father's partnership offer with a dismissive wave. Now, he extends his hand to me. "I've been hearing your name in interesting circles lately. Never connected the dots until tonight." His handshake is firm, respectful. "Your Riverview project downtown, quite innovative. Affordable housing units integrated with luxury condos without sacrificing aesthetic appeal? Bold move." "Thank you, Mr. Weber." I keep my voice steady, though my heart thunders against my ribs. Arden Capital believes housing shouldn't segregate communities. His eyes spark with interest. "Arden Capital. Named after your mother's maiden name, if I'm not mistaken?" A small, genuine smile slips out. "You've done your homework." "Always do, especially when someone's quietly amassing prime real estate in my backyard." He tilts his head. "Though not quiet enough, apparently." Behind Weber, I spot Commissioner Patricia Ramos of Chicago Planning approaching, her trademark crimson blazer cutting through the sea of black tuxedos. She purposefully bypasses my father, who has cornered Mayor Thompson by the bar. "Felicia," Ramos says warmly, "your plans for the downtown revitalization are exactly what this city needs. Heritage architecture preserved but modernized for sustainability. I wish more developers thought beyond the next quarter's profits." Weber's eyebrows climb higher. Across the room, Garrett has stopped mid-sentence, his attention locked on us despite Clara tugging at his sleeve. Miss Ramos has been instrumental in approving our waterfront access proposal, I explained to Weber, whose interest visibly intensifies. The public boardwalk connects 3 previously isolated neighborhoods. 3 neighborhoods that have seen property values increase 28% since your project broke ground, Ramos adds, without displacing original residents. A small crowd forms around us. I recognize faces from city council meetings, zoning committees, and finance boards people my father and brother dismiss as bureaucratic obstacles rather than partners. People who have quietly approved my permits and variances for years while Richard Langford complained about their inefficiency at country club lunches. Tell us more about Arden Capital, Felicia, Prod's Margaret Winters, editor of Chicago Business Monthly. Most of us didn't realize you'd built your own company. I take a deliberate breath. For 7 years, I've operated in the shadows, purchasing properties through carefully structured LLCs, attending meetings where executives addressed my male subordinates instead of me, reinvesting profits instead of flaunting wealth. The secrecy served its purpose. But tonight demands truth. Arden Capital Holdings owns 9 commercial towers and luxury apartment complexes across Chicago. I state simply. Current portfolio value, approximately $480 million. The silence spreads like spilled wine across white linen. 400, Weber whispers, doing quick mental calculations. That would make you one of the largest private property owners in the city. 4th largest, I corrected him, though our focus is quality over quantity. Vivian has abandoned the Hendersons, practically dragging my father toward our growing circle. His face contorts between confusion and something darker, anger or fear, perhaps both. Which properties specifically? Weber asks, professional curiosity overcoming social politeness. I meet my father's gaze across the circle before answering. The Magnolia Tower on Michigan Avenue, the Edison Building in the Financial District, Lakeshore Residence, Hawthorne Plaza, where we're standing now. I pause, allowing each name to land. The Langford Legacy Headquarters Building. A sharp intake of breath travels through the crowd. My father freezes mid-step. Your company headquarters? Weber asks my father, confusion evident. My father's company rents 3 floors in the building. I clarify. Arden purchased it from the previous owners 4 years ago, when they faced bankruptcy. We've since renovated the entire structure for LEED Platinum certification. Garrett pushes through the crowd, Clara trailing behind him like a reluctant shadow. That's impossible, he blurts. I would have seen the paperwork. I handle all the major lease agreements. Check your lease, Garrett. You'll find Arden Capital Holdings listed as the landlord. I believe your 10-year agreement comes up for renewal next spring. I keep my tone conversational, as if discussing the weather rather than demolishing his perception of our family's power structure. What else? Weber prompts, fascination evident in his voice. Riverside Residence. I continue. The luxury condominium complex on the North Shore. Clara's fingers tighten around Garrett's arm. But we live there. Yes, I confirm. Penthouse 3, I believe. Beautiful views of the lake. Vivian steps forward, her designer dress rustling with the sharp movement. This is absurd. You expect us to believe you've secretly built some real estate empire without anyone knowing? Without your own family knowing? I allow myself a small shrug. Not entirely secret, just quiet. Property records are public, after all. I simply never advertised the connection. And Serenity Spa? Weber asks, naming Vivian's pride and joy, her exclusive day spa catering to Chicago's elite women. My smile remains steady. Arden purchased the building 3 years ago. We've been very accommodating landlords, I think. Vivian's face drains of color. Her business, her sanctuary from family politics, her claim to independence, sits in my property portfolio alongside everything else. Murmurs ripple through the crowd. I catch fragments. All this time. Right under their noses. Richard's daughter. For the first time tonight, people are looking at me, really looking not as Richard Langford's disappointing daughter, but as a force in my own right. The realization doesn't bring the satisfaction I once imagined. Instead, I feel something quieter, steadier. Validation not from my father's approval but from my own accomplishments. The crowd's attention pivots when Patricia Ramos mentions my plans for the abandoned Riverside Industrial District, 30 acres of prime waterfront real estate that sat decaying for decades. Your proposal for mixed-use development with affordable housing components is exactly what that area needs," she says, loud enough for everyone to hear. The committee was particularly impressed with the preservation of the historical factory facades while creating modern interiors. "That property isn't for sale," my father interjects sharply. "Langford Legacy has been negotiating for those parcels for years." Ramos glances at him, then back to me. "The city accepted Miss Langford's bid 3 months ago. Construction begins in spring." The revelation lands like a physical blow. My father's shoulders stiffen, his composure slipping for the first time tonight. That property, the cornerstone of his expansion plans for the next decade, now belongs to his invisible daughter, Felicia. My father's voice cuts through the conversations. A word. On the balcony. It's not a request. For a moment I consider refusing, making him wait as he's made me wait for recognition my entire life. But that would be petty, and pettiness has no place in business. The crowd parts as Richard Langford strides toward the balcony doors, assuming I'll follow as I always have before. Weber catches my eye and gives me a nearly imperceptible nod of respect before I turn to follow my father. Outside, the Chicago skyline glitters against the night sky, a constellation of lights mapping the very properties we've just discussed. My father stands with his back to me, hands gripping the stone balustrade, knuckles white with tension. When he turns, his expression isn't what I expected. Not rage, not even disappointment. Just calculation. I step onto the balcony, the Chicago skyline spread before me like a constellation of ambition. The evening air carries a hint of Lake Michigan, fresh against my face after the stifling atmosphere inside. Behind me, the murmurs of 200 guests create a backdrop of white noise as they process what they've just learned about the quiet Langford daughter. My father joins me, his footsteps measured and controlled. The confidence that powered his entrance to his own birthday party has fractured, replaced by something more calculating. He stands beside me, gripping the stone balustrade with one hand, his knuckles white despite his casual stance. "You should have told me," he says finally, breaking the silence between us. His voice lacks its usual commanding tone. "We could have worked together, Felicia, combined our holdings. Imagine what the Langford name could have accomplished." I watch a helicopter drift between skyscrapers, its lights blinking steadily against the darkening sky. The city stretches below us, unaware of this private reckoning occurring 65 floors above Michigan Avenue. "You never asked what I was building," I replied, my voice steady. "Not once in 7 years." His jaw tightens. "I offered you a position. As your assistant, after I graduated from Wharton, top of my class. The words aren't bitter. They're simply facts, laid bare between us like balance sheets. I wanted you to learn the business from the ground up." Funny, Garrett started as vice president. The wind picks up, ruffling my father's silver hair. For a moment, he looks older than his 65 years. "I watched you. You know," I continue, turning to face the city again. "I learned from every deal you closed, and every mistake you made." His head snaps toward me. "Mistakes?" "The Riverview project in 2018. You rushed construction to meet the tax incentive deadline. 3 years later, the foundation issues cost you $12 million in repairs and lawsuits." I keep my voice neutral, the way I do in board meetings. "The Johnson Heights acquisition. You leveraged too heavily because you wanted to announce it at the economic summit. Interest rates shifted, and you barely broke even." A muscle works in his jaw. "Those projects were complicated. They were ego projects," I corrected him gently. "You sacrificed sound business for recognition. I built it differently." Through the glass doors, I can see guests watching us, their expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. My father sees them too, and straightens his posture, adjusting his cufflinks. "I underestimated you," he concedes, his voice so quiet I almost miss it over the wind. Then, louder, with renewed confidence, "But we can fix this. I'll create a senior position for you at Langford Legacy, Executive Vice President of Development. You'll have your own team, your own budget. We'll announce it tonight." I almost laughed. After everything, he still thinks this is a negotiation for a job I might want. "I employ 218 people, Dad. My company manages properties worth nearly $500 million. I turn to face him fully. What exactly would I be gaining by working for you? Inside, the crowd has shifted. Eyes dart between us and the approaching figure of Mayor Harrison, his distinctive white hair visible as he makes his way toward the balcony doors. My father notices too, his expression sharpening. We should continue this discussion in private, he suggests, reaching for my elbow. I step back slightly. I'm fine right here. The balcony doors slide open, and Mayor Harrison steps out, bringing with him the sounds of the party inside. Richard! Quite an evening you've put together. The mayor's handshake is firm, his smile genial but eyes shrewd as they move between us. And Felicia, just the person I wanted to see. That waterfront project of yours is transforming the South Harbor. The council was impressed with the presentation your team gave last week. My father's face remains carefully neutral, though I catch the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth. Thank you, Mayor, I responded. We're committed to sustainable development that serves the community, not just investors. That's exactly the approach Chicago needs. The mayor nods, then glances at my father. Richard, you must be proud to have raised Chicago's most visionary developer. The Langford name is certainly making its mark on our skyline, though perhaps not in the way everyone expected. A flash of something anger, recognition, crosses my father's face before he masters it. The Langford family has always valued innovation, he replies smoothly. More guests drift toward the balcony. Through the glass, I spot Garrett approaching, his usual swagger tempered by what looks remarkably like uncertainty. Clara follows close behind, her socialite smile fixed firmly in place. Garrett reaches us first, champagne glass in hand. Felicia. He begins awkwardly. I had no idea you were so successful. He stumbles slightly over the last word. Impressive portfolio you've put together. Thank you, Garrett. I keep my response simple, watching as he shifts his weight from one foot to another. Maybe we could get lunch sometime. Talk about business. His voice carries a note of forced casualness. I've got some ideas you might find interesting. Clara slides up beside him, her diamond necklace catching the light from inside. We should really get together more often, she adds, touching my arm lightly. Sisters-in-law should be closer, don't you think? From the doorway, I catch sight of Vivian, her perfect smile straining at the edges as she watches this unexpected family reunion. The woman who once told me at 16 that I lacked the Langford business instinct now looks at me with something approaching calculation in her eyes. The mayor excuses himself to greet other guests, but not before mentioning a development committee meeting he'd like me to join next week. The invitation hangs in the air, noticed by everyone on the balcony. My father's expression shifts minutely as he processes what's happening. The power dynamic he's cultivated for decades is rebalancing before his eyes, and for once, Richard Langford doesn't control the outcome. Well, he says, his voice pitched for those nearby to hear, this calls for another toast. He raises his glass, eyes never leaving mine. I raise my water glass in response, recognizing the opening move in a new game between us. One where, for the first time, we both know all the pieces on the board. 20 minutes after balcony conversation, I watch Father's approach with the practiced calm of someone who has spent years predicting his moves. He slides next to me at the bar, signaling the bartender with 2 fingers. A united front, he says, voice lowered for privacy. The Langford Empire deserves a coordinated strategy moving forward. The bartender places a scotch before him, Macallan 25, his standard. I notice how Father's hand trembles slightly as he lifts the glass. Coordinated how, exactly? I ask. Your properties, my connections, my experience, your. He hesitates, searching for the right word. Unexpected assets. Together, we present as the Langford dynasty Chicago expects. I take a small sip of water, letting the moment stretch. Around us, the party continues, but the energy has shifted. Eyes dart our way, then quickly avert when we notice. Family reputation matters, he continues, voice hardening. Loyalty matters, we're Langfords. The threat hangs thinly veiled between us. I've heard this particular sermon since childhood, family name as both blessing and weapon. Excuse me, Miss Langford. A woman in a burgundy dress approaches, notebook in hand. Patricia Summers from the Tribune, Society pages. I wonder if I might ask about the family business transition. Readers are fascinated by Chicago's power families. Father's spine straightens, ready to deliver his standard speech about legacy and his son's promising future. There is no transition, I say, my voice steady. Arden Capital Holdings and Langford Legacy are separate companies with different philosophies. Patricia's eyebrows lift. Different how? Father shifts beside me, a subtle warning in his posture. I step slightly away from him, claiming my space. Langford Legacy builds exclusively luxury developments with maximum profit margins. I explain. Arden Capital prioritizes mixed-use developments that include affordable housing units, environmental sustainability, and community spaces. Interesting contrast, Patricia murmurs, scribbling notes. And which approach has proven more successful? Father interjects. Different metrics of success, of course. Langford Legacy has 50 years of stable returns for our investors. And Arden Capital has outperformed those returns by 22% over the last 5 years. I add, while also receiving 3 sustainability awards and creating housing for over 2,000 middle-income families. Patricia's pen freezes mid-stroke. 5 years? You've been operating for 5 years without leveraging the Langford name? Yes. I smile. I wanted the work to speak for itself. Father's knuckles whiten around his glass. Let me introduce you to some of my team, I say, gesturing toward the entrance, where 6 people have just arrived. Thomas Reeves, my COO, leads the group, a tall black man with wire-rimmed glasses who Father once dismissed as not executive material. Beside him walks Marilyn Whitaker, our 70-year-old chief architect who should have retired years ago, according to Richard Langford. Elena Sanchez, head of community development, whom Father called too idealistic during her interview with Langford Legacy. They approach with the quiet confidence of people who know their worth. My executive team, I say to Patricia. Each one interviewed with Langford Legacy first and was rejected. You poached from your father's interview pool? Patricia asks, the pen moving rapidly. I recognize talent he overlooked. I correct. And built a company culture where their strengths could flourish. Father's face darkens as recognition dawns. The Riverside project, he mutters. The Madison Heights development. The lakefront renovation. Those were all you? Commissioner Jenkins appears at my elbow, champagne in hand. Miss Langford's waterfront development is exactly what Chicago needed. Accessible public spaces combined with sustainable commercial units, unlike some previous projects that prioritized luxury condos over community access. The pointed remark lands squarely. Father's last lakefront project had drawn criticism for blocking public beach access, though the negative press had mysteriously disappeared after several large donations to the right foundations. Those were my deals, Father says under his breath. The Thompson contract, the city funding for Madison Avenue. Were awarded to the better proposal. I finished. You just never bothered to find out who was behind Arden Capital. The murmurs around us grow. I can practically see the mental calculations happening across the ballroom as Chicago's elite reconsider their assumptions about the Langford family hierarchy. Garrett materializes beside Father, his perfect smile now strained at the edges. Clara hovers a step behind, her expression unreadable. Felicia. Garrett begins, his tone so reasonable it immediately triggers my suspicion. I've been thinking about diversification opportunities. Perhaps there's room for collaboration between our companies. Are you asking to work for me, Garrett? The question hangs in the air between us. His smile falters. I have insights into markets you haven't explored yet, he offers. I'm sure you do. I maintain eye contact. My company has an excellent training program. All new employees start at entry level, regardless of their last name. You're welcome to submit an application. Clara coughs lightly behind her hand. Someone nearby chokes on their champagne. That's hardly appropriate for someone with my experience, Garrett sputters. What experience would that be exactly? I ask. The Anderson deal you claimed credit for but was actually negotiated by your assistant? Or the Watson contract that fell apart after you missed 3 deadline extensions? His face reddens. He hadn't realized I kept tabs on his professional failures. You can't speak to me like that, he hisses. I'm still a Langford. So am I reply evenly. The difference is, I never used it as a substitute for competence. Father stands utterly still, watching his carefully constructed world reorganize itself around this new reality. For the first time in my memory, Richard Langford has no ready response, no cutting remark, no dismissive wave of his hand. The power balance has shifted, not with a dramatic confrontation, but with the simple revelation of truth. Across the ballroom, Thomas catches my eye and gives a subtle nod. We've prepared for this moment for years, building something stronger than a name, something that can't be taken away with a clever insult or public dismissal. As Richard Langford stands alone, I wonder if reconciliation is possible if he can accept a different kind of legacy than the one he imagined. But that's tomorrow's question. Tonight, I have a company to run. I no longer stand alone near the balcony of the Regency Grand Ballroom. 1 year after my father's humiliating birthday speech, I'm surrounded by Chicago's most respected developers, architects, and city officials. They cluster around me, not out of pity, but genuine respect. My champagne flute remains half full tonight. I've been too busy discussing the waterfront revitalization project to finish it. The marble floors still gleam beneath those rose gold chandeliers, but I move across them differently now. Not with the hesitation of someone bracing for rejection, but with the confidence of a woman who owns the building. And now, the MC announces, his voice bouncing off the 30-foot ceilings, a few words from our host. My father walks toward the microphone. At 66, he's still straight-backed and silver-haired, but something has changed in his posture, a subtle yielding that wasn't there before. The room quiets. Looking around this room, he begins, echoing his words from last year. I see the faces of friends, colleagues, and family who have been part of my journey. I take a small sip of champagne, feeling the cool liquid slide down my throat. No knot forms in my stomach this time. Tonight, he continues, I want to recognize someone who has transformed our city's skyline while none of us were paying proper attention. He pauses, eyes finding mine across the room. To Felicia Langford, not the failure I imagined, but the woman who outbuilt us all. Applause fills the ballroom, not the uncomfortable, forced kind from last year, but genuine appreciation. I accept it with a slight nod, no longer desperate for his approval, but acknowledging the journey we've both traveled. Commissioner Reynolds approaches, hand extended. Your Northside development plan is brilliant, Felicia. Sustainable housing without displacing current residents, exactly what this city needs. Thank you, Thomas. The community input sessions were invaluable. Across the room, Garrett lingers near the bar, no longer commanding attention. His first 6 months at entry level in my company have stripped away some of that Northwestern polish. Clara stands beside him, her diamond necklace replaced by something more subtle. They both nod respectfully when our eyes meet. Vivian approaches with a champagne flute, her smile tight but no longer contemptuous. The renovations to the spa are magnificent, Felicia. My clients love the new solarium. I'm glad to hear it. The architect thought natural light would enhance the space. A young woman in a simple black dress hovers at the edge of our conversation. She reminds me of myself, a year ago, brilliant but uncertain, hungry for recognition but afraid to claim space. Jessica Walker. She introduces herself when I turn her way. I've been following your Southside project. The integration of affordable housing with mixed-use development is exactly what I've been researching. I see my younger self in her eyes, the determination, the vision. Come by my office next week. I'd like to hear more about your research. The relief on her face mirrors what I felt when the security guard refused to remove me from this very ballroom last year. Later, I slip onto the balcony alone. The Chicago skyline spreads before me, lights twinkling against the night sky. My buildings stand among them, not ostentatious monuments but thoughtful additions to a city I love. I no longer need my father's validation to know my worth. The best revenge wasn't loud or cruel. It was success carried with grace, building something that would last long after tonight's applause faded. And that was a victory nobody could take away.